All right, so Bootstrap. You might be like, what is Bootstrap? Basically, Bootstrap is a solution for developing responsive mobile-first websites. So responsive web design is aimed at producing grid-based layouts that adapt to proportions of user screens. Some elements that that you will see are a fluid grid. So basically, there's columns and rows. So typically, you have 12 columns across, and then each thing is a row. Okay, so if you look, like, this is one row, this section right here, okay, and you can see it's 2 columns. There's a column here and a column here, and again another column, that's a row across. And basically the way I set this up is that you would have a certain number of columns. Each section here is made up of however many columns you want to be across. So in this case, I have this section here and this section here. So it's this text and it's this picture. And if it's 12, that means I say that this section is 6 columns and this one is 6 columns, so that it equals total 12. Okay, it'll make more sense when we do it. Then you have flexible images, which just basically means that the images will expand and contract. I don't know if I have this one set up as expanding and contracting. I might have one down. Let's see. Are you going to? I don't think I set that up on these. Some of them I do a good job with that. Sometimes I don't. And in this case, I didn't. But basically, you have images that will adjust their size depending on the browser window as well. The text can be adjustable. We do it by EMs. EM just means the size of the letter M. Basically, it's kind of like percentages, but it's based on the font, not on the browser size. Media queries, which means it'll detect the device in the browser, so that it gets an idea of, what it sets the initial scale. Basically, the idea here for most responsive sites is mobile first, because if you look at most people, the majority nowadays, and certainly in the future, they're going to be looking at the web, websites more than likely on their phone. I mean, I'm sure you go on your computer a bit, but you probably use your computer a bit more than the average person because you are probably in classes and you're working on the computer. So obviously you're going to have it open. But if you're just, a mechanic or a doctor or, any number of different professions, there's a good chance that you're going to use your phone probably as your primary source on the web, right? Or a tablet or what have you. So, and even beyond that, there's all different sizes. Now you can go to the official site here, Bootstrap, and it gives you all this information in here, and we'll talk about this stuff a little bit later. But Bootstrap's actually made by Twitter, believe it or not, which is odd. So there's a couple different ways of attaching Bootstrap. So one is you can download the Bootstrap and you can host them yourself. So what that would mean is you would go to, let me see, I wonder if they have it up here. Right, you would click on this, you would download it, and hopefully it'll download. Did it download? Nope. Okay. It would. Oh, okay. There we go. We would download it like so, and we'll just pull that over here. Okay, you'd have this here. Then I would extract it. Extract all. That's fine. Next. Okay. You would extract it. And then inside of here, you'll see you have a CSS and JavaScript. So then when you normally make your new folder, so I'm going to do a new folder. Let's call this Bootstrap site example. Okay. So normally inside of that folder, right, this is my main folder, I'd have my HTML, and then I'd have other folders in here, right? So new folder, and there'd be folder, images, and there would be new CSS, and also, which we haven't really done anything with yet, but there'd also be JS, okay? So, and then your HTML would be outside here. So we put our pictures in there, put our CSS in here, and a JavaScript there. So all you would do is you would take this CSS, and you would only need one of these. So you would need the Bootstrap, probably the min. This one here, let me see, grid, CSS, grid, mid. You know what? Let's just grab all of it because it ain't going to hurt anything. Oh, that's map, sorry. So you probably just want this one. This one's minified. It just means that it's a little bit smaller and they condense it some. So honestly, either this one or this one would work. I'm going to grab all of it though, just for fun's sake. So you drop that into your CSS there. You go to the JavaScript, and then you take this, and again you would just grab this and you'd stick that in there. Okay, and then you would just go on and you would attach those manually, like you would attach your own CSS externally through a link in your thing. Okay, so that's basically how it works. So you can do that and link it yourself in your own site, and you host it locally. The other way to do it is use a CDN, or Content Delivery Network. And the idea here is that instead, and actually this is an example of a CDN. I didn't put an example of the other one, but if I go back here, and we'll go back, let me see, right here. You see where it says CDN? So basically what you do is that in the header of your site, you would copy this. So instead of linking to your local folder, you'd actually be linking to their folder on the internet. So if you look, it's an absolute URL. It says HTTPS. So it actually goes right to the specific website, and you would link that CSS sheet. And then you would also link these JavaScript sheets to your site, but it would be looking on the internet. So if for some reason you were working, let's say you were working locally and you lost internet connection, the Bootstrap actually won't work because you have to have an internet connection. But obviously you're on the internet if your site's uploaded, so that just makes sense anyway. So that's the other way of doing it, is that you don't host them yourself, and you actually just link to their site, and they have the code. Now the reason why that is beneficial is because what'll happen is this. For one, you don't have to host it yourself, so you save space. It's minimal though. The other reason is if they update the code, if there's some sort of weird security leak or something, I don't know. If they change anything, yours will automatically be updated. But the main reason is because what happens is that every time your computer goes onto a site, the first time it loads the site, it's actually a little bit slower. The second time it loads a site, it's much faster because it will cache all the files in there. Now, more than likely, there's a bunch of people that use Bootstrap, a bunch of sites, like mine uses Bootstrap right here. So what will happen is that if you go to my site and then you go to another site that uses Bootstrap, it doesn't have to download that file again. It already has it cached. So the site will load faster because everybody else is using the same CDN, so it makes your site faster. So that's the other advantage to it. Now, so this is a good way of working, but you have to manually do it, and you can follow the directions here. It's not that bad. The other way to do is to use Dreamweaver itself. So I'm just going to show you how to do that real quick. So I'm just going to type in Dreamweaver right here. And it will take a long time because Dreamweaver is a little bit on the slow side. Now, it might ask you to manage site. In this case, I'm going to cancel. But if it does say it, you can just go ahead and click on Manage Site, and then you can follow along. I'm going to cancel. I'm just going to show you if I didn't do that, what I would need to do. I'm going to close this guy out. Okay. So you go to Site. Oops. Site. And if you're on Manage Sites, you could click on New Site. Or cancel. You go to Site, and we'll just hit New Site. And it's the same thing as doing the other thing. So what I want to do is this. We'll give it a site name. And I'm just going to call it Bootstrap Example. And then I want the local folder. So basically, what's the root folder? So I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to navigate to that one I just made. So it was Bootstrap. That's the folder I want, right? So that was the top end folder, and select folder, and then we'll just hit save. Okay. Now, let me do this real quick, actually. Crap. I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to delete that, okay? So, like, I never made the CSS and the Bootstrap links, okay? So, I still made that local folder. Now, what I want to show you, this is how you would set up your Bootstrap. So, you just go to File, Create New, or you click Create New here. You do HTML, but what we've been doing is we've just been doing a straight-up document. You can actually choose to do Bootstrap. And we'll hit Create New. We don't want to use existing because we don't have one in there. You want to turn off Include Pre-Built Layout. Basically what it's going to do is it's going to make a bunch of example items. We don't want that. If you click on Customize, you can choose how many columns and what the gutter is. The gutter is the space between each column. So again, if I were to look here, you can see like I have two columns here, but notice they're not touching. This section is not touching this. This image is not touching this. There's a gutter. There's a space between each section. Oops, not that. Okay. So we create new. I can click on customize and adjust this. I would leave this alone, but you can determine what is a small screen, what is a medium screen, what is a large screen, and what is extra large screen. So what does it choose as the different sizes? Now, depending on your version of Dreamweaver and what have you, there might only be 3. There might be 5, because there's actually extra small as well, is also another option, but it's only giving me these ones. So anyway, you can determine what would be the different sizes. I would just leave that all alone. I just want you to see what it is, and then we hit create. Now, what I want to show you is this. It's going to automatically create the document. Now, you'll remember before when you create a new one, it already knows how to, it already puts like the head and the body and stuff like that, which is nice, but that's not hard to code. But not only did it do that, it didn't do just like the doc type and, you know, putting a head and the body and all that. It also went ahead and it created the other stuff I need for it to work. So it set up the viewport meta tag for the initial size that Bootstrap requires. It also created a file, a link to a Bootstrap style sheet, and it created the scripts at the end, the 3 scripts. What I want to show you is this. If you look at here, remember I deleted those 2 folders? I left images, but I deleted the 2 that I had made. If you look, it actually made 2 folders, and it put the Bootstrap items right inside there. That is why we have to manage the site first, because otherwise when it goes to make those files, it's going to make them into like, who knows, it's going to set, it has some sort of default folder that it's going to put them in. But if you manage the site first, it knows where the root folder is and it will place them in the right spot. So that's why you have to make sure that you manage your site or set a new site if it's a new one. But when you go to switch to a different site, you want to do manage site and you want to select that site. But we're not going to do that. So the other thing I want to show you real quick is this. You'll notice that it says file, and then it's an absolute URL, right? It says C, users, knowledge cone, desktop, boot site, blah, blah, blah. It's a big, long path. It shouldn't be that, right? It should just be CSS Bootstrap. So the reason why it's like that is because I haven't saved the file. So this file doesn't exist yet. So I'm just going to go ahead and save it. And we're just going to call it index.html. And we'll hit save. And then you're going to see it now says CSS Bootstrap, and it says JS jQuery. The reason why you can do that now is that it now can say, oh, next to my file, this is the file we're in, it's CSS, and then this. Before, it didn't exist, so it had to be an absolute URL. It had to say, oh, wherever you end up saving, it's this exact spot. Now it knows to convert it to the relative URL, so that's why there's an advantage there. Anyways, that's probably the easiest way to do this. So even if you want to hand code the rest of this stuff that we're going to cover, I would still set up the initial thing this way. At least that's what I would personally do. Set it up this way in Dreamweaver real quick. You know, maybe put in a couple of things if you want. And then afterwards, you can hand code out in Visual Studio Code or whatever coder you prefer. You can go ahead and put those in there. Okay. But that's how you would set up that initial thing there. And let's go back here. So there's basically 2 flavors of a container. So everything that you want to be responsive, everything that you want to have that can shift around, you have to put it inside a div class called container. All right. So for instance, this is like a div class container, and you can see this is it right here. And well, actually, I got better examples here. So there's 2 flavors though. There's container. There's one container. And there's one called Container Fluid. And so I'll show you what the difference is. So I'm just going to click on this guy. So this one is called Container. What I want you to notice is, see how there's a big gap here and the big gap here? Okay. So what that means is that it will always have these big gaps. And it doesn't go all the way to the side. And what will happen is that as you shrink it, you'll get discrete movements, not like stretching. So watch. As I go like this, see how nothing changes size? Then watch, it's going to snap to a new size. See how it kind of snapped? It didn't scale, it snapped down, and then it'll snap until it eventually be one on top of the other, which is always what ends up happening. When it gets to a certain size, each of the elements will actually stack. Okay? So that's that example. Fluid, on the other hand, does this. So notice it goes all the way to the end, right? So no matter what, it's always going to fill the screen. And watch as I scale this. See how it's scaling with it? The items are actually scaling. Until eventually it will, get a little farther, it will snap on top of each other. It still will do that, but it actually scales, okay? So the difference is one is sort of almost like a fixed width, and the other one is liquid. Now, you can use them interchangeably. You can make your entire site all in container, or make the entire site all in container fluid. It's kind of up to you how you want to build it. But you can also have them, in subgroups, okay? So you put in a container, and I'll just do that real quick here. So I'm going to go inside the body, and I'll just show you how to do it. So I'll go to Insert, and I'm going to switch from HTML to Bootstrap Components. So it's all built right in. And you can see we have container, container fluid. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll do container fluid. So I can show you container fluid, and it's going to make this div. I'm just going to hit Enter. Okay. That back in. Okay. So now I got this container fluid, okay? And now all of my Bootstrap stuff goes inside this. So almost look at it like it's the body tag, like this is the new body. Everything that you build goes inside of this container fluid, all right? Now what you need to do is you have to specify your columns, okay, and your rows. So the idea is that you would say something is a certain number of columns depending on the width. So here's an example here. I'll click on this guy. And so right here, we got 3 equal column widths. So each one says when it's medium, it's 4, 4, 4. This one's 3, 6, and 3. So notice this one's like half the size of this one, and this one's also half the size. But they always equal 12, right? So 4 times 3 is 12. And then 3 plus 6 plus 3 is 12. And then we got 8 and we got 4. And as I collapse these, you'll see that they'll look fine until I get past medium. See how this isn't really small? This is actually medium. So once it becomes below medium, they'll stack. Now, you can also nest them inside each other. Okay, so now you can also do something where you can determine what they look like at extra small and what they look like at medium. And so you'll see here. I think it's kind of weird. It's down here. Anyway, you get kind of the idea. Let me go back to my thing. All right, that's the main meat of it. Those are the things you mainly need to know. So let me show you on here. So what I would do is say, okay, I'm going to have on my top just one big long banner, okay? So what I would do is I'm not going to hand type it. I'm going to show you how to do it over here. I'd go to Grid Row with Columns. So I click up here, and it's going to say how many columns to add. And I'm going to say, okay, I want it to just be one long column, right? So I'll hit 1, and we'll hit OK. And what you're going to see is that it's going to make a row, because it's going to say this is one row crossed, and then it's going to make a column that is 12. So that means if it's 12, that means it goes all the way across. And then I'll just put an H1 in here. So we'll do, oops, H1 isn't this exciting? It's not, obviously. Okay, so that's one column. I'm just going to enter. Okay, so that's one column, and you can see it has, it's one row, and it has one column in it. So let's say next I want to do is I want to have two columns. So I will, after this, I will go to Grid Row with Column. This time I'll choose 2, and we'll hit OK. Now what that's going to do, I'm going to enter in between so you can see each row a little bit easier. Like there's one row, this is the next row. So it made another row, and you can actually see it here. If you look, see how there's 2 pieces? And it made each one 6. I'm going to hit enter in here, and we'll hit enter in here. And I'm just going to put like, does it do a paragraph in here? They don't. Oh, you know what? Let's see if I can add lorem ipsum. It's not going to add the, dang it doesn't add the P. All right, so we'll do P, and then I'm going to add lorem ipsum, and I'm just going to copy this P here. All right, and then inside of this one, I'll do the same thing. P. Okay, so now I got 2 equal columns. Okay. And what it did is it made each one 6 because it has to equal 12. All right, so let's do another one because this is so much fun. All right, so we're going to do another Grid Row with Column. This time I'm going to do, let's do 4. We'll get fancy here, and we'll hit OK. Okay, so now what it did is it made another column. You can see it's got 4 sections. All right, now what I can do in here, and we'll hit enter because we would want content in between, and I'm just going to do a small p, Let's go, this is some content. Okay, I'm just going to copy that just so you can see it. Okay, and then we'll enter, tab B. Okay, so you can see we got one row, and this row has this column, this column, this column, and this column. It's got 4 columns, and then inside of the column I put in the content. So I could put a picture in here, I could put multiple different things, I could put multiple paragraphs in there. I could take this and put in another one, and you're gonna see now it has 2. Okay, but it's always gonna fit inside of this column. Now what I can do is be like, what if I don't want them equal? You don't have to. I could say make this 6, and then it has to equal 12. So notice how this one just shifted down. So if that one's 6, let's do 2, 3, and 1. And so now you'll see that this one takes up 6, this one takes up 2, this one takes up 3, and this one takes up 1. All right. Voila. Pretty interesting. Okay. Now, that works pretty fine. And you can see if I grab this, I can shrink it, and it will show the responsiveness. Okay. Now, let me go ahead and do straight up live view so you can see this a little bit better. What you'll notice is, here's my small, medium, large, and extra large. Now right now, as I go across, you'll see when it's at large, looks the same, looks the same, looks the same, and then once it goes beyond medium, this is medium, it's going to snap and stack. So if I want it to look like this up until, let's say, large, and then I want to change, I can do that. Let me show you how you do that. Okay, so instead of LM or MD, you could do LG. That's large. LG, LG, LG. Okay, now I'll go back to live here. You'll see it'll look fine in extra large, it will look fine in large, but watch, it's going to snap now at medium. Just this part here we're looking at, not the top parts. Okay, so I can actually change, depending on what size it is, actually changes that information. Now you might be like, well, what if, because I don't know why you would do that, if you look at my thing, you see these are big bodies of text, right? I might want them to be a little bit different. I might want them to, when they get to extra large, be this size, and then when they get to large, maybe have one go all the way across, or something. Okay, I could change the way I want those to look. So real easily, what I could do is go up here, and I could say, okay, when you are, what is it, XL? I'm not sure which one. Hang on a second. Well, we'll say when you are medium, I want you to be 12. And we'll say this one 12 as well. Okay? But I need one to tell before I do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write another one, COL-MD, or sorry, not LD, dash LG, gets XL. Looks wrong though. And then we'll say when it's XL, this one will be 6. I'm just going to copy that, Control C. So what I'm doing is I'm adding one position for when it's extra large. I want it to be 6, so they'll be next to each other. But when you become medium, I want them to be 12, so they stack. And then we can do something where that wouldn't really work. Anyway, so you'll see here extra large, and that looks fine. And then, oh, actually, you know what? It doesn't even matter when it does medium because it does that. Let me show you down here. Let's say I want these to be a little bit different. So right now I have it at large is when they snap, right? I could also add to this one, COL-MD dash, and we'll say, I was having that one take a lot. So we'll say this one becomes, let's say 9, okay? So that's going to take up a whole lot of space. So when it becomes medium, that one's going to take up 9. And then I'll have this one take up 3. So those will basically become 2 items. And then I'll have this one take up 6, and have this one also take up 6. Oops, I did that wrong. Sorry, we got to add it in here. So COL-MD md-6. I'll just copy it. Notice there's a space between these, because what I'm doing is I'm adding multiple classes. So now, if I go over here, you can see it'll look like this, which is fine, okay? But then once it gets to the medium here, those will become two, this section and this one, and then the other ones will stack, okay? So you can determine what sizes. Oh, I did 9. That's why that wasn't working. That should be 3 back here. Okay. So it'll get to the point where that one will take, boom, see how this is 9 across, this one's 3, and then these two become 6s, and they stack on top of each other. So basically you can determine what you want it to look like at different sizes. So let me do this one a little bit different to make this a little bit easier, because I don't like the way that looks. So we'll say extra large will be 6, and then just for no reason, I'm going to say we'll make at here, when it's medium, that one will be 9, and we'll make this one 3. And then we'll do col-sm dash, and we'll say when it's small, we'll make this one, I don't know, 3. We'll go the opposite direction, so you can see. Control V. Come on. And then this one will be 9. Okay. So when it's extra large, there'll be 6 and 6, which means these will be half and half. Okay. This row, these two columns in this row. And then when it's medium, this one will become 9. So this will be 2/3, and this will be 1/3. And then when it becomes small, this will become 1/3, and this one will become 2/3. So if you watch, so we're watching these two columns here. All right. So it's 6 and 6. It's half and half. Now watch when I come here. Boom. See, this one becomes 9. This one becomes 3. Okay. Now watch when I go smaller. Not there. Sorry. There. It switches. Now this one is 9, and this one is 3. All right. Now you wouldn't want to do that normally, because that doesn't make any sense. Because why would they swap around? But you can change the sizes depending on the size of the thing, and that's really the meat of what you get with this. Okay, so you always want to make a row, and then you say how many columns you want to be across. Now, if you don't want to, you don't have to do a bunch of these. Normally, people do about 2. They'll do like 1 and another one. You don't have to do 3. That's a little bit more than what you need. But you could also just do 1. Just be like, when it's large, it's 6, and then after it becomes less than large, they'll just stack. It's totally fine. If you look at mine, that's pretty much the way that mine is. Okay. But that's the columns and what have you. The components. So Bootstrap has its own built-in components. So like I said, this is mostly about the layout. The components are like special built-in items. So they have what they call a jumbotron, a carousel. That one's pretty useful. A nav bar, all sorts of different things. And if I click on this, you can see. So they have these pre-built buttons like this, where it just automatically will format them to look a certain way. These thumbnails, labels. They have these drop-down menu items, these navs. Oops, I guess I don't want to click on those. They have carousels. They're basically just pre-made things that you can use. And there's a bunch. I'm not going to go over through them all. Honestly, the only ones you're probably going to use are going to be these two, the carousel and nav bar, just because those are a little bit more complicated. And I'll just show you real quick how that works. So let's say after this H1, I'm just going to go ahead and put a nav bar in here, right? Because that makes sense. So if you look over underneath Bootstrap Components, you can see that there are, where are you at? With a baseball bat. Why am I not seeing it? Nav bar. So if I click the little arrow, you can see there's different options. So I'll just do basic nav bar. So click on that guy. And boom, it's going to build this. Now, you're probably going to want to change some of this, like remove items, add items. It takes a little bit of looking through it, but you should be able to figure it out. But if I go to live, you'll see it automatically, and this has little drop downs. It automatically has this nav bar and it has all this pre-formatting done. Okay, which is pretty sweet. And basically, they have these built-in classes that they already have. Now, we could go through and figure out what each one of these different classes mean. And there's documentation on all that, but I'm not going to do that because that just takes too long. But you can see, basically it has these pre-built items, and we'll cover these a little bit more in depth later, but I just want you to be aware that they exist. And also has a carousel. So let's do another div row. So I'm just going to do another one on the bottom here. So we'll do, oh, you know what? I'm going to show you can do another, go like this. So the top part here is all, did I do fluid? I think I did fluid, right? So let me show you what the container would be. So I'm going to do another container, and instead of doing the fluid one, I'm going to just do a regular container, just so you can do two. All right, and then inside of this, I'm going to do a div row, class row. I'm just make it 1 because I just want it to be the carousel. Okay, so that's got 1 row, columns 12, and then we'll go ahead and add a carousel. And you can see it's a whole big long thing of code. All right, and it just has these generic things built for you. But if I go to live, you'll see that, see how this is going all the way to the end because this is the fluid, but see how this has the gap there? And as I collapse this, see how it kind of, I don't know if you can see it, it snaps. All the other stuff looks like it's snapping too. I think it's just not responding very quickly. But it's this built-in carousel, which normally would be a big pain to make, and it has it built into it, which is pretty awesome. Now, you'd want to adjust the formatting and all those other items, but that's another thing that's built into this. Jumbotron's kind of stupid. It's just like a big thing. It's not really that useful. But anyway, it has all these little things in here, like accordions and other stuff that you can play around with, and you can click on them and see what they look like. That's fine. You can also just go on this and look through the documentation on here and see what they have available. There's actually more components than this. This isn't all of them. It doesn't matter, but you can look through there. Oh, it also has Bootstrap defaults. All that means is basically, what was here, I wonder? All that means is that, excuse me, all that means is that when you look at Bootstrap, it automatically has like a font associated with it. It has certain margins. It has certain, just all the formatting, the defaults, they've been changed, what the default would normally be. So just be aware that that is, and if you click on this, I think it'll show you. It doesn't really seem to give you too much, but it has default settings for that. Okay, so Dreamweaver obviously allows you to do this. I already kind of showed you this, but you can click on the Bootstrap Components, and then it's color theory, and that'll be our next video. All right, so hopefully that was super confusing, but hopefully you kind of get the idea behind it.